I never believed in the concept of the one until I met Daniel. But our story didn't begin with love at first sight or a romantic first date. It began with a lease agreement, a cramped apartment in Brooklyn, and a moment that changed everything while he slept peacefully on our worn-out couch. My name is Alex. I'm 27 years old. When I moved to New York City 3 years ago, I was running from a past that felt too small for the person I was becoming. I'd spent my entire life in a conservative town in Ohio, where being gay meant being invisible. I'd dated women, tried to fit the mold, spent countless nights staring at my ceiling, wondering if I'd ever feel at home in my own skin. New York was supposed to be my fresh start, the city where I could finally be myself. But the reality of New York is expensive, lonely, and overwhelming when you're starting from scratch. That's where Daniel came in. I found his roommate listing on a Tuesday afternoon. The post was simple. Looking for a chill roommate, LGBTQ plus friendly, must love bad movies and good coffee. The rent was reasonable, the location was perfect, and something about that post made me smile. I messaged him immediately. We met at a coffee shop in Williamsburg. I arrived 15 minutes early, anxious and rehearsing conversation topics in my head. When Daniel walked in, I felt my breath catch. He was beautiful, in an effortless, way messy dark hair, warm brown eyes, a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He wore a faded band t-shirt and jeans with paint stains on them. "Alex?" he asked, extending his hand. "That's me," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about his work as a graphic designer, his love for obscure indie films, and his collection of vintage vinyl records. I told him about my job in marketing, my recent move to the city, carefully edited versions of my life back in Ohio. I didn't mention that I was still figuring out who I was. I didn't mention that I'd only been out for a year at the end of our coffee. He looked at me with those warm eyes and said, "I think we'd make great roommates. When can you move in?" The first few months of living with Daniel were an adjustment. He was naturally messy, leaving coffee cups on every surface and forgetting to take out the trash. He sang loudly in the shower, always off-key. He had a habit of falling asleep on the couch while watching movies. His long limbs sprawled out in impossible angles. But he was also kind, thoughtful, and funny in a way that made even mundane moments feel special. He'd leave sticky notes on the fridge with terrible jokes. He'd make extra coffee in the morning and leave it in a thermos for me. When I had a bad day at work, he'd order Thai food and queue up our favorite bad movies without me even asking. We fell into an easy rhythm. Movie nights on Fridays. Lazy Sunday mornings reading the paper and arguing about politics. Late-night conversations about everything and nothing. Daniel was openly gay, confident in his identity in a way I envied. He'd casually mention ex-boyfriends, drag shows he'd been to, and pride parades from years past. He existed in his queerness so naturally, like breathing. I was still learning how to do that. He never pushed me to talk about my own journey, but he created space for it. When I mentioned that I hadn't been to Pride yet, he simply said we should go together this year. No pressure, but I think you'd love it. Things started changing around month 4, or maybe they'd been changing all along, and I was just too afraid to acknowledge it. I started noticing small things. The way Daniel's eyes crinkled when he laughed. The sound of his voice first thing in the morning, rough with sleep. The way he absently played with his hair when he was concentrating on a design project. The warmth of his presence when we sat together on the couch. The space between us feeling simultaneously too much and not enough. I tried to ignore it. Daniel was my roommate, my friend. I couldn't risk ruining what we had by developing feelings. Besides, I had no idea if he felt anything beyond friendship for me. He was kind to everyone. Maybe I was just another lost gay guy he was helping find his way, but the feelings grew anyway, stubborn and insistent. They kept me awake at night, made my heart race when I heard his key in the door, and filled me with a bittersweet ache every time he smiled at me. I started staying out later, finding excuses to be elsewhere. I picked up extra projects at work. I went to the gym more often. Anything to create distance. To protect myself from the inevitable heartbreak of wanting someone I couldn't have, Daniel noticed. Of course he did. "Hey, are you okay?" He asked one evening when I came home late for the 5th night in a row. "You've been kind of distant lately." I'm fine," I lied. "Just busy with work." He studied me for a moment, those perceptive eyes seeing more than I wanted them to. "Okay, but, you can talk to me, right?" "About anything?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. It was a Friday in October, one of those perfect autumn evenings in New York when the air is crisp and the city feels alive with possibility. I'd had a particularly difficult week at work, and I came home exhausted, emotionally drained, and craving nothing more than silence and solitude. But Daniel had other plans. "Movie night," he declared when I walked through the door. No arguments. I already ordered pizza, and I found this absolutely terrible sci-fi film from the 80s that I know you'll love to hate. I couldn't help but smile. "Fine, but I get to pick next week." "Deal." We settled onto our small couch with pizza and beer. The movie was indeed terrible bad special effects, worse acting, and a plot that made no sense. We laughed until our sides hurt, making fun of every ridiculous moment. Somewhere during the second act, Daniel's head began to droop. He'd been working long hours on a big project, and exhaustion was catching up with him. His head eventually came to rest on my shoulder, his breathing deepening into the steady rhythm of sleep. I froze. Every nerve in my body was suddenly aware of where we touched, the weight of his head on my shoulder, the warmth of his body next to mine, the faint smell of his shampoo, something citrusy and clean. I should have woken him up. Should have gently nudged him and suggested he go to his own bed, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there, barely breathing, afraid that any movement might break this moment. In the flickering light from the television, I looked down at Daniel's sleeping face. He looked peaceful, younger somehow, with his defenses down. There was a small scar above his eyebrow that I'd never noticed before. His eyelashes cast shadows on his cheeks, and in that moment, something inside me shifted. All the fear, all the careful distance I'd been maintaining, suddenly felt pointless. Life was too short to spend it running from the things that made you feel alive. I'd spent so many years hiding who I was, pretending, trying to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to hide from this. I carefully adjusted my position, trying not to wake him and let myself relax into the moment. If this was all I got this one evening with Daniel sleeping on my shoulder, then I would take it. I would let myself have this. The movie ended, credits rolling in silence. The apartment was quiet except for Daniel's soft breathing and the distant sounds of the city outside our window. I knew I should wake him, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. I must have dozed off myself because the next thing I knew, I was being gently shaken awake. "Alex." Daniel's voice, soft in the darkness. "Hey." I opened my eyes to find his face close to mine. Our positions shifted so we were facing each other on the couch. The TV had gone dark. The only light came from the street lamps outside. "Sorry," I mumbled, disoriented. I fell asleep. Me too. He didn't move away. "Alex, can I ask you something?" My heart began to race. "Sure. Have I done something wrong?" "These past few weeks, you've been avoiding me, and I've been trying to figure out what I did." "You didn't do anything wrong," I said quickly. "I promise." "Then what is it?" His eyes searched mine in the dim light. "Because I miss you. I miss my friend." The vulnerability in his voice broke something open inside me. I'd been so focused on protecting myself that I hadn't considered I might be hurting him too. "I've been scared," I admitted. The words felt both terrifying and liberating. "Of what?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment where everything either changed for better or worse, but I was tired of running, tired of hiding. "Of this," I said softly. "Of you. Of how I feel about you." Daniel went very still. "How do you feel about me?" "Like I can't breathe when you're around. Like you're the first person I want to tell about my day. Like I've been falling for you since the day we met, and I don't know how to stop." The words tumbled out in a rush. I know I shouldn't feel this way. You're my roommate, my friend, and I don't want to ruin what we have. But I can't keep pretending anymore. The silence that followed felt eternal. I waited for him to pull away, to let me down gently, to suggest I find a new place to live. But then he smiled. It started small, just a quirk of his lips, and then bloomed into something bright and beautiful. "You absolute idiot," he said, but his voice was tender. "I've been waiting for you to figure that out for months." I stared at him. "What, Alex?" "I've had feelings for you since our second week living together. When you made me breakfast because you knew I had an important presentation. When you stayed up with me until 3 in the morning helping me meet a deadline. I've been trying to show you, but you seemed so uncertain, and I didn't want to push you. Have feelings for me?" I needed to hear it again, needed to be sure this wasn't some elaborate dream. "Yes, you beautiful disaster of a human being. I have feelings for you," I breathed. Oh, and then he was kissing me. Or maybe I was kissing him. It didn't matter who moved first because we met in the middle. And it was everything I'd imagined, and nothing like I'd expected all at once. His lips were soft. The kiss tentative at first, as if we were both afraid of breaking some spell. But then his hand came up to cup my face, and I tangled my fingers in his hair, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against mine. "I can't believe you've been avoiding me because you liked me," he said, laughing softly. "We're both idiots," I agreed, unable to stop smiling. "We really are." That night, we talked until dawn. We moved from the couch to the kitchen, making tea and toast at 3 in the morning. We sat at our small table and told each other everything. I told him about growing up in Ohio, about the years I spent trying to be someone I wasn't. I told him about the first time I admitted to myself that I was gay, alone in my college dorm room at 23 years old. I told him about the fear and shame, but also about the relief of finally knowing the truth. Daniel told me about his own journey, about coming out in high school and losing friends, about his relationship with his parents, which was complicated but loving, about past boyfriends, heartbreaks, and the lessons he'd learned about what he wanted in a partner. "I want someone who sees me," he said. "Not just the parts one show the world, but all of me, the mess and the uncertainty. Someone who makes me want to be better while also accepting who I am right now." "That's what I want to," I said. "I think that's what I've always wanted." As the sun began to rise, painting our small kitchen in shades of gold and pink, Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. "So what happens now?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never done this before. The real thing, I mean, with someone I actually care about." "Neither have I," Daniel said. "Not like this. We could figure it out together," I suggested. "Take it slow. See where it goes." "I'd like that." He squeezed my hand. "Though, full disclosure, it's going to be weird living together while we're dating. What if we have a fight? What if it doesn't work out? Then we'll deal with it," I said, feeling braver than I had in years. "But I don't want to not try, because I'm afraid of what might happen. I've spent enough of my life being afraid." Daniel smiled at me, and in that moment, I felt something I'd never felt before. Certainty. Not about the future, or how things would unfold, but about this. About us. About choosing to be brave. "Okay," he said. "Let's figure it out together." The early days of our relationship were both exhilarating and terrifying. We had to learn how to be roommates and boyfriends simultaneously. Navigating boundaries and privacy in our small apartment, there were awkward moments. Like when Daniel tried to give me space after our first day, official date where he took me to a small Italian restaurant in the West Village. And I found him sleeping on the couch because he wasn't sure if he should assume he could sleep in my bed now. "Get in here." "You ridiculous person," I'd said, laughing despite the nervous flutter in my chest. We literally slept on the couch together. This isn't any different, except it was different. Everything was different now, painted in new colors, filled with new meaning. We learned each other's rhythms in new ways. I learned that Daniel liked to be Little Spoon, despite being taller than me. He learned that I needed coffee before I was capable of conversation in the morning. I learned that he left love notes in unexpected places stuck into my lunch, stuck to my laptop, slipped into the pocket of my jacket. He learned that I showed love through acts of service, making sure he ate when he was stressed, organizing his workspace, remembering small details about his day. We had our first fight about a month in. Something stupid about dishes and responsibilities and stress from work bleeding into our home life. I'd raised my voice, and Daniel had shut down. Going quiet in that way, that meant he was hurt. Later, after we'd both cooled down, we sat down and actually talked about it. We apologized. We established better communication. We learned that loving someone doesn't mean never hurting them. It means choosing to work through the hurt together. 3 months into our relationship, Daniel asked if I wanted to go to a gay bar with him and his friends. It was a simple invitation, but it carried weight. This would be me, officially, as his boyfriend. Meeting his people. Existing publicly in a queer space. I was terrified. What if they don't like me? I asked the night before, what if I don't fit in? Daniel pulled me close, his arms around me in our bed. They'll love you because I love you, and you'll fit in because you belong there. You belong in queer spaces, Alex. You don't have to earn that. The word love hung in the air between us. It was the first time either of us had said it out loud. You love me? I whispered. Yes, he said simply. I love you. I've loved you for a while now. I love you too, I said, and saying it felt like opening a door to a room I didn't know existed. I love you so much it scares me. Good scared or bad scared? Good scared? I decided. The kind of scared that means something matters. The next night, I went to the bar with Daniel. His friends were welcoming, funny, and completely unconcerned with my nervousness. We danced badly, laughed loudly, and I watched Daniel in his element comfortable, joyful, surrounded by community at one point. He pulled me onto the dance floor, his hands on my waist, and we swayed to some pop song I didn't know. The lights were dim, the music was loud, and I was surrounded by couples just like Usman, dancing with men, women with women. People existing in their authentic selves, without apology, and I felt it belonging. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. June came, and with it, Pride Month. Daniel and I had been together for 8 months by then, and he'd been planning our Pride experience like a military operation. You need to experience your first Pride properly, he declared, showing me his color-coded schedule of events. We're going to the parade, the rally in Washington Square, and then the parties afterward. That's a lot, I said, feeling overwhelmed but also excited. It's Pride, baby. It's supposed to be a lot. The day of the parade was hot, the kind of New York summer heat that made the air shimmer. We met Daniel's friends early in the morning, all of us wearing variations of rainbow everything. Someone had brought face paint, and Daniel carefully drew a small pride flag on my cheek. There, he said, stepping back to admire his work. Perfect. The parade itself was overwhelming in the best way. The crowds, the music, the floats, the signs, the joy. Everywhere I looked, people were celebrating, existing loudly and proudly in their identities. I saw couples holding hands, families with their LGBTQ+ kids. Older generation who'd fought for this moment, younger generation who'd inherited the fight. Daniel held my hand through all of it, our fingers interlaced, and I felt tears prick my eyes. You okay? He asked, concerned. Yeah, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I never thought I'd have this. I spent so many years thinking I'd have to hide who I was forever, and now I'm here with you and it's real. This is my life. Daniel pulled me into a hug right there in the middle of the crowd. This is your life, he confirmed, and it's beautiful. But life wasn't always parades and pride. There were hard days too. My parents found out about Daniel in July. I'd been putting off telling them. Scared of their reaction, but they'd asked one too many questions about my life in New York, and the lies became too exhausting to maintain. The phone call didn't go well. My mother cried. My father went silent. They asked if I was sure, if I'd thought about this, if maybe I was just confused. They brought up the Bible, our community back home. Their disappointment, I hung up feeling hollowed out, like someone had scooped out my insides and left just a shell. Daniel found me sitting on the fire escape, staring at nothing. Hey, he said softly, climbing out to sit beside me. Bad call? I nodded, not trusting my voice. He didn't try to fix it or tell me it would be okay. He just sat with me, his presence a steady comfort. Eventually he said, "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't help, but I'm sorry. They might never accept it," I said. "Accept me, I know. That's their loss." He took my hand. "You're incredible, Alex. You're kind and funny and brave, and you deserve people in your life who see that. If they can't, that's their failure, not yours. It still hurts. Of course it does. They're your parents. But you have people who love you exactly as you are. You have me. You have our friends. You have a whole community. That doesn't make it not hurt, but you're not alone in it." I leaned my head on his shoulder, the same way he'd once leaned on mine, and let myself feel the hurt. Let myself grieve the relationship with my parents I'd hoped for, but might never have. But I also felt grateful. Grateful for Daniel, for this life we'd built. For the courage to be myself, even when it cost me something. Our 1-year anniversary arrived in February. We celebrated by recreating our first coffee shop meeting, sitting in the same spot where we'd first decided to be roommates. "Can you believe it's been a year?" Daniel asked, holding his coffee cup with both hands. "It feels like longer," I said. "Like you've always been part of my life? Is that a good thing? The best thing? We'd both grown so much in that year. I'd learned what it meant to be in love, to let someone see all of you and trust they'll stay. I'd learned that being gay wasn't something to hide or be ashamed of. It was just one part of who I was, as natural as breathing. I'd found community, found pride in myself, found home. Daniel had grown too. He'd learned to be patient with my process, to support me without pushing. He'd learned that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone's imperfections fit with yours. "I have something for you," Daniel said, reaching into his bag. He pulled out a small wrapped package. Inside was a Kiara apartment key-on, a keychain that said, "Home is wherever you are." "I know you already have a key," he said, slightly nervous. "But I wanted you to know that you're not just my roommate or my boyfriend. You're my home. And wherever we go from here, whatever happens, that doesn't change." I felt tears sting my eyes. "I love you. I love you too." He reached across the table and took my hand. "So what do you think? Ready for another year?" "I'm ready for all the years," I said. "All of them, with you. We still live in that same small apartment in Brooklyn. We still have movie nights on Fridays. Daniel still falls asleep on the couch, and I still watch him in those quiet moments, marveling at how lucky I am. But we've also built new traditions. Sunday brunches at our favorite spot. Annual trips to Pride. Hosting game nights for our growing friend group. Quiet mornings where we read the paper together, his feet in my lap, coffee going cold as we get lost in conversation. We talk about the future sometimes. About maybe getting a bigger place eventually. About what a wedding might look like. About the life we want to build together. But mostly, we just live. We exist in this beautiful, ordinary love that grew from friendship and proximity. And one perfect moment on a couch when Daniel fell asleep on my shoulder, and I realized I didn't. "Want to run any more people?" Ask me sometimes how I knew Daniel was the one. I tell them about that night, about the way everything shifted when I finally let myself be honest. But the truth is, there wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small moments, cups of coffee left on the counter, terrible jokes on sticky notes, hands held in crowds, quiet support in hard times, laughter over bad movies, and the simple, profound decision to show up for each other every single day. Being gay used to feel like something I had to hide, a secret that would separate me from the life I wanted. Now I know it's the thing that led me to the life I needed, to community, to authenticity, to Daniel, to myself. That night when Daniel fell asleep on my shoulder, everything changed. But really, everything had been changing all along. I just finally had the courage to let it, and that courage, the courage to be seen, to be vulnerable, to choose love even when it's scary. That's the real story. Not just of how I fell in love with my roommate, but of how I finally learned to fall in love with myself. To anyone out there who's scared, who's hiding, who thinks they'll never find their place, your story isn't over. Your people are out there. Your home is waiting. And you deserve all the love you've been dreaming of. Sometimes it starts with a roommate listing. Sometimes it starts with a moment on a couch. But wherever it starts, trust that you're exactly where you need to be. Trust the journey. Trust yourself. And when you find your person, whether it's a roommate, a friend, a stranger in a coffee shop, hold on tight. Build something beautiful. And don't be afraid to fall asleep on their shoulder. You never know what might change.